Now, Juneteenth is June combined with the 19th to make Juneteenth. Now, right now, it has become an official federal holiday. Juneteenth is a special celebration to commemorate the end of, in the United States, the historic practice of slavery in the United States. In a sense, it's a day honoring freedom for all people in the United States. Juneteenth marks the day when federal troops went into Galveston, Texas, 1865, and those troops were led by Gordon Granger to inform the people about 250,000 enslaved black people that they were free. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed by President Lincoln. These people didn't know they were free, but they found out, and that's why we celebrate freeing these people. The general read order number 3 to them, and here's what it said. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and the rights of property between the former masters and the slaves, and the connection therefore existing between them becomes that between an employer and hired laborers. Now we find out that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed. And I just told you that was 2.5 years afterwards. And at that time, they began to celebrate. They had prayer meetings, educational meetings. But last year, President Biden signed into law, officially making Juneteenth a federal holiday. The federal workers have this day off. But we celebrate this day in all kinds of ways. And it's been 150 years African Americans having celebrated this holiday. They celebrate it by different ways. And sometimes they have parades and programs and public readings, singing, rodeos, concerts, festivals. Now today we are going to celebrate through just telling some African American stories. But as you see the flag up here, the red is the color associated with this holiday. It symbolizes sacrifice and transition. And a lot of red is used. And that red represents the blood and the resistance that my people had in that time. And during these celebrations, red food is generally served. The red velvet cake, watermelons, barbecues, and these things are used to celebrate. But as I said, tonight we are going to celebrate through storytelling. I'm going to share some African American stories with you. And my first one is one that I love so very much. It's called The People Who Could Fly. Now they say that people could fly a long time ago. People from Africa could fly. They could climb up on a gate. They knew magic. You couldn't tell the ones who could fly from the ones who could. One such young lady called her Sarah, and she had a babe on her back, and then there was old Toby. He stood tall, but he knew magic too. And Sarah worked hard with the babe, and finally she just sat down. And old Toby came and he said, "Daughter, you must go as you know how." And he began to raise his arms and he said those magic words, "Cooley-bar, cooley-bar, cooley-bar." And Sarah lifted one foot and she lifted that other foot and she began to roll over in the air. And next thing we know, Sarah flew. And old Toby said, "Yes, daughter, you needed to go. You had to go." And the next day out in the field, working hard, was a young man who fell. And old Toby came and said those magic words, "Cooley-bar, cooley-bar, cooley-bar." And that young man began to fly, then another one, and another one, and another one. Oh, they began to fly. They flew to freedom. Old Toby said, "Cooley-bar, cooley-bar," and they just began to fly. And then there was old master, who was a hard lump of clay, a gritty rock pile that could not be moved. And then the overseer was the one on the horsebacks. And he pointed out the ones who slowed down. And then that old driver, he was tough. He would strike them and he hit that girl before she left with that baby on her back, but she just flew on. But all those men began to fly. And old master said, who said those magic words? And old Toby threw his head back and he said, he, ha, he. We know magic out here in this field. I said them. Old master took his gun out of his hip pocket. You know, he was getting ready to kill old Black Toby. But old Black Toby called his people together. They didn't ring, sing, they didn't shout, they joined in hands. And old master didn't understand what was going on. They began to fly. The trials and tribulation that the African Americans had coming from Africa to America. I'm going to tell you a story called the Igbo Landing. Many, many years ago, the people went to Africa and they found 18 adult people to come to America. And they fooled them, they told them that they would get a chance to work. But when they got here, guess what? They found out that they were going to be slaves. And you know what they said? We don't want this. Before we are slaves, we'll be buried in our grave. They said water brought us here, and water will take us away. And down in Dunbar Creek on St. Simon's Island on the east coast of Georgia, they all linked themselves together. And they back in that water. And they went down singing an old song called "Oh Freedom." Oh freedom, before I be a slave, I'll be buried and go home to my master. I'll be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Now they tell me thorns of visitors go to that island every year. And guess what? You can hear the clicking of those chains. And you can hear those voices as they go down into the water. Before I be a slave. Instead, you want to sing the song, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave.
And go home to my home.
And be free. Now, that is some of the trials and the tribulations that we had. And I want to tell you about how they helped, how we helped each other. Back in those days, now this is a story written by Reverend Faulkner. And Reverend Faulkner lived down in Virginia. His people had a place. He was an African American. And they had a man named Simon Brown working. And Simon Brown told William Faulkner, and this is the black William Faulkner, told him these stories when he was just a kid. And as an adult, he recorded them. And you can find them in a book called When the Animals Talked. And I'm going to tell you two of those stories. And one is how the slaves helped each other. How they helped each other. They didn't have no doctors. They didn't have no undertakers. In the evening time when the men got out of off work, they would go and help a soul that was in a lot of trouble. They would cut the wood and stack it up. They helped cook food. And I'm going to tell you about an old lady named Sister Dicey. Sister Dicey died one night, and the women folk had to get her ready for burial the next day. They had to get her ready in 24 hours. They gave her a bath, found the best dress they could find. Somebody pinned a flower on Sister Dicey. Put that flower on Sister Dicey, and then they had the people coming and going. And they prayed and they sang. And you might know one of those old songs, Sister Taylor, that they sang. I got shoes, shoes. And all of God's children got shoes.
When they get
to heaven, I'm going to walk all over.
God.
I got wings and you got wings. But when I get to heaven, I'm going to fly all over. Next day, old master came, and he told Sister Dicey's family that they could have the best pair of mules to take her to her final resting place there across the fields. And Simon says he went ahead and helped dig that grave. And he dug until he got so high he got out. He didn't want it because it was 6 feet deep and about 4 feet wide. And he got out of the grave. And then they put those plow ropes under there and let that box down in the old preacher's shed. Sister Dicey, God has taken you out of this world. Sister Dicey, you gonna be in a better place. And they sang those songs. He said, earth to earth, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. And they lowered Sister Dicey down and said, may you rest in peace. And they covered her up. As soon as they covered her up with that dirt, they put a mark at the head and a marker at her feet. And the ladies found some little flowers and broken glass. And they said, this is the best we can do. Old Master can't own our souls. Only God can own our souls. And that's how they helped each other out. And another one of those old stories that Mr. Faulkner recorded was Bert Tiger and the Big Wind. And the way these people survived was a lot of times they couldn't say what they wanted to say, but they told stories in a fashion to satisfy themselves. Bert Tiger and the Big Wind. Now all the little creatures were so sad. They were hungry. They were thirsty. They didn't have water and food. But it was one place there was plenty of water and plenty of food. And that was over on Clayton's place. But the only problem was there was a great big tiger over there. And he wouldn't let these little animals have nothing to eat. Sure, they was standing up looking so pitiful. And along comes Brother Rabbit hopping and skipping like he had never been hungry a day in his life. He said, what's wrong with you all? He said, we're hungry, we're thirsty, we don't have anything to eat. And they said, what? And Brother Rabbit, being the little creature he was, said, come on, let me give you a plan. And they all gathered around to get the plan. And he told them what to do, and he said, in the morning, everybody be on your posts. And early the next morning, the old Brother Bear came down through them woods, toting a great big club, and he went and he stood by that hollow tree. And Alligator Cooter came and he got inside that log. And them birds, the eagle and the hawk and the big birds got in the top of the trees. And the smaller creatures, the raccoon and possum, them got in the middle. And them teeny tiny creatures got down on the ground. And when the sun was half high, lo and behold, Brother Rabbit came down through there with a ragged rope on his back, and he was singing, oh Lord, a great big wind is a-coming through these woods and gonna blow all the creatures off the earth. And just as Brother Rabbit said that, Brother Bear started beating, bam, bam. And Alligator Cooter was inside that log. Big-a-boom, big-a-boom, boom. And the birds up at the top, they began to shake those trees, and horns in the middle began to shake those trees. And with all that racket going on, it sounded like the biggest cyclone was a-coming through those woods. And Brother Rabbit was a-saying, oh Lord, the biggest storm is gonna come through these woods. And with all that racket, old big tiger came out. He said, what's going on? What's going on out here? And Brother Tiger said, I want to know what's going on. And Brother Rabbit finally looked at him and told him the biggest cyclone in the whole world was coming, and he had to tie up all the creatures. And old Tiger said, tie me. Tie me. I don't want the wind to blow me away. Tie me. Tie me. And Brother Rabbit said, I don't have time to tie you up. I got the creatures over here, and I got the creatures over there, and I got the creatures down there. And the tiger began to beg, please, please. And finally, Brother Rabbit gave up and said, okay, I'm going to tie your striped hide. And he got up against the tree. Brother Tiger got up against the tree, and Brother Rabbit started tying him. And he tied him real tight, and finally, he could still rear up a little bit, and he said, tie me some more. I don't want that cyclone. I don't want that hurricane to blow me away. The wind was a-blowing, and the leaves was a-flying. The breeze was a-blowing, and the creatures was a-crying. And Brother Rabbit was a-tying. He was tying those creatures up. And he got old Brother Tiger tied so tight. And then he finally said to all the little creatures, stop, look. He had all the water. He had all the food. God don't like ugly. Now you stay here till them ropes fall off of you. And then he told them little creatures, you all go get your buckets, go get your pails, get all the food and all the water you need. And do you know they had a prayer meeting for Battle Leader Brother Rabbit? And that's the end of that. Thank you, Brother Tiger and the Big Wind. Now you know the people couldn't communicate their feelings, so sometimes it was through their stories that they were able to communicate their feelings and let it all come out how the old master could take advantage of you, but you could also take advantage of old master from time to time. Now, many of you have heard how the Underground Railroad started, but I heard it was a man one day, and for some reason, the Underground Railroad was not a railroad. It was a system of secret trails and secret roads and a system of human helpers. But a man named Tice Davis woke up one day, and for some reason he said, I no longer can be a slave. He didn't know what came over here. He had heard that there were people somewhere north who was willing to help him. And he decided he would run. Now he kind of had the feeling what freedom would be like. He thought he would be able to sleep without fear just engulfing him. He didn't know how that would be, but he thought, oh, I know. I'm going to run. And he had heard that there were Presbyterian ministers over on the other side of the Ohio River. He had heard there were free blacks willing to help. So he struck out. Somebody told him, listen. Listen for the bell across the river. Look, and you might hear it down on the riverbank. It may be dusty and dark. Listen. Listen for the bell and look for the light. Now Tice started out. He knew in order for him to get across the Ohio River, he would need a boat or a skiff or something to get across. And everybody in Kentucky knew that a slave was no longer a slave if they could just get on the other side. That was the word of every Kentucky slave. A slave would be a free man on the other side. So he kept running, and then he heard old master. He heard old master and his people behind him. He dared not look back. And he finally got to the big Ohio and he looked for a boat. There was no boat. There was no skiff. Tice picked up one foot and he put in that big river. And he picked up that other foot. And then he began to take those long strokes across. Now old master was behind him. He had to find a boat. He finally located a boat. And he finally got on the other side to the Ohio River. And when he got to the other side, he saw a dark, exhausted figure. He said, I think we got him. I think we got him. I think we got him. But old master blinked his eye. And with the blink of his eye, Tice was gone. So old master combed up and down the river banks. He asked those people over there on that side, had they seen her run away? Nobody would admit seeing Tice. He looked in the trees and he looked in the bushes and he looked everywhere looking for him. And finally he concluded he must have gone underground. And old master and his man went on back. Tice was in free land, and he went on to be a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And they changed that underground to Underground Railroad and had the nerve to use the sophistication of conductors. Those were the people that helped those people escape. And the safe houses were called depots. And I understand Tice went on to be a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And that's the story of the Underground Railroad. Now, when we came over here, we brought different dances and different chants, and I'm going to do a little chant for you that we brought from Africa. Juba, Juba, what's my name? Juba, Juba, it's all the same. Call me this and call me that. Call me skinny, call me fat. Juba up, Juba down. Juba, Juba, all around. Juba pick, Juba husk. Juba ate the cornbread husk. Juba up, Juba down. Juba, Juba, all around. Juba, Juba, Juba killed a hog today, took the foot and ran away. Juba, Juba, what's my name? Juba, Juba, it's all the same. Call me this, call me that, call me skinny, call me fat. Juba up, Juba down, Juba, Juba, all around. Now I want to talk about a little lady many of you have heard. And her name was Harriet Tubman. Now Harriet Tubman was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, an abolitionist, a civil rights worker. She was a whole lot of things. Now my name, and I would like to turn myself to Harriet for a minute. My name is Harriet Tubman. Was one of 11 children of Harriet and Benjamin Ross, born in Dorchester County, Maryland. As a child, I was beaten much. Had a whole lot of beatings, a whole lot of work, and absolutely no schooling. Well, old master didn't have any work for me to do. He hired me out to work for other people. I was a nursemaid as a young child, worked in the fields and on the riverbanks down with those traps. I got so sick, my mother had to take care of me. They sent me home and they got me well. At the age of 20, word came to the plantation that old master was going to sell me and my brothers. And I thought, there's two things I can have in life: liberty or death. And I'm going to try for liberty. And it was at that point Harriet decided she would leave and escape for the north. She traveled that underground road, sleeping in safe houses during the day and traveling at night. Eventually, Harriet found herself in free Pennsylvania. And when she got there, she looked at her hands to see if they were the same as they had been in slavery. She looked at her feet to see if they were the same. The sun shone down like glory. Oh, Harriet was a happy camper. She had made it to free Pennsylvania. She got herself a job and worked for a while. But she began to feel very, very lonely because she didn't have no people there. So what she decided to do was make some trips back south. And here's what she did. She made her way back south to try to get her mother and her brothers and her sisters. And in order to get in and out the south, she had to figure out a way to do this. So some of those old songs that they used, she began to sing. As she went back down through there, she began to sing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot."
Swing low,
Sweet
chariot, coming for to carry me home. Looked over Jordan,
what did I see?
coming for to
Carry me home. She used all kind of methods to get back down to that, gather up her people, gather up her brothers and her sisters. And when those old dogs began to get after Harriet and those people that she was saving, they started singing, "Wade in the water, wade in the water,
wade in the water, children, wade in the water.
God's gonna trouble ships, and they had a $40,000 bounty over her head. And eventually Howard had to, after she had made many trips back, she saved many of her people from slavery. She escaped and went on to Canada. And when the Civil War started, she returned back and was able to fight in the war. She was a spy, a scout, and a cook. But eventually Harriet retired, had a home in Auburn, and that house is a historic place today. It's where she died at age 93. And I would like to tell you that the work Harriet did in trying to free her people, she's up there with people like Bessie Ross and Paul Revere. And in recent years, they have considered putting her on the $20 bill. It's under consideration. But she did a whole lot of work in trying to free our African Americans, trying to get them free. And I would like to tell you that I'm going to just show you some patterns, quilt patterns. I don't know if you ladies are familiar with those quilts that the people used to put on the fences to give direction during that era in history when the people was trying to escape from the bondage of slavery. And people could not talk. Everything was in codes. We used the music. And some say that the spirituals, that the slaves went to church enough to find out that old master was talking about a savior. But when they began to sing, they weren't talking about going to heaven. They was trying to get out of bondage. But they used all kinds of things. And I read about these quilts. And we don't know how much of this is real authentic because everything, remember, the people could not read or write, so it was just passed down. But I'm going to show you some patterns that are used for quilts, and they say they were used for direction. Now this is a bear paw. They said when the quilt was hung out and the bear paw was there, they were to follow that paw and it would lead them to where they could get some food. And this is a wagon wheel. When they threw out that wagon wheel quilt, that meant that the people was to start getting ready because the old wagon would be rolling soon. This is the North Star. The North Star is something that they followed. It led them. And this is the flying geese. They were to follow these geese. And this is the crossroads up there in Cleveland. They said that they came to a point where you had to make a decision which road you would take, which one of those freedom roads you would take. And this one here is a wrench. And they say when the enslaved people saw that wrench hanging out there, They knew to get the necessary tools together that they would need on the journey. And these are the bow ties. When a slave was dressed in tattered rags and all at a point, they would dress him up as a free man, give him a bow tie, so he wouldn't look like a slave and he could go ahead and be free. Now we take Juneteenth as a time to reflect, to look back over our life, and to look forward. It's just a celebration of African American culture, and different people celebrate in different ways. Now would you ladies like to ask me a question? Do you have any comments?
I've heard a lot of the songs the slaves would sing would be directions to get to the north, or when to go and when to not go.
Yes. When they sang Swing Low Sweet Chariot, that meant the old chariot was coming in there and to take them.
Steal away.
Steal away, that meant you were to be ready and you would be on your way. And also Harriet was known as Moses, and they called her, she was known as the biblical Moses. She set her people free. She led them out of bondage. And they say sometimes these people weren't talking the religious, the biblical Moses. They was talking about old Howard coming through there. And I think I left out of my story that Harriet was hit in the head with a big weight at an early age, and it caused her to have sickness, sleeping sickness and dizziness. But also she began to have visions, and she felt that God Almighty had sent her some visions to save her people. Well, thank you so much for listening.